hesitate on making moves. I listen about as much as I can tolerate. From here on out, we cutting out the people who don't contribute to winning. Crazy dust to everybody who was here from the fucking beginning.
Yeah. All right. Well, it looks like we're going to do part 2 here. I'm heading to another destination in Colorado from a destination in Colorado. Looks like it's a Colorado day. We might get a couple seasons of weather this morning. It's about 47 degrees. Relatively calm, probably 2-3 mile an hour winds, just because it's always a little breezy. And let's see, when I left off for part 1, I was pretty much San Francisco, uncle and aunt, Santa Cruz Mission. So yeah, we lived in Santa Cruz, and my aunt was the course supervisor for the Santa Cruz Mission. I used to sell Dynetics books, door to door, that kind of thing. My uncle was also into it. Both artists, my dad and uncle and grandfather, were all artists at this time, and they would do fine art shows and sell their art, etc., etc. Which was kind of, when you don't know any better, growing up in a high demand religious group with those kind of thoughts be pervasive as far as like morals, ethics, that kind of thing. When you're also inundated in the art world, it's an interesting take on Scientology. It's kind of how probably the Celebrity Center started. There's always been a niche for artists, musicians, and that kind of thing, poets, whatever. And maybe even LRH kind of fancied himself a poet. I don't know if the Celebrity Center advices were his inception, or if it was something the Gillhams did, or Gillams did, as a way to not get ethics, or as a way to help expand Scientology, or like most things, it's when you are faith and you have, maybe you're a bit fanatical in your faith, then you're going to do everything you can to forward that thought process. And I think that's how we ended up with a lot of the things that Scientology is today, is kind of a hodgepodge, or a culmination of fanatical people trying to apply the words of one person who they've been convinced that that's going to be the save the world, and it's the only way that the world will ever be better. So then a lot of those things make more sense. Doctors and chiropractors and whatnot were like, well, let's do Sterling Management and Able, and let's do WISE, and let's do Criminon and Narcanon, and so all these different facets or fingers, which I guess broadly is kind of a mirror of how religion started for humans, right? Like, we've had a few major religious groups, and then there's even the Catholic Church considers a lot of the current faiths and denominations splinter groups of the original faith. So it's sort of natural to splinter. I guess with Scientology, they just try to keep it all theirs. So they claim it all and splinter in the name of forwarding the only workable technology that will save mankind. So I think that's one reason why the Dianetics book door-to-door campaign maybe came about. I remember talking to Mike Rinder about it one time, and he remembers that the idea and plan of that program, and he was actually shocked that some of the lower level or the missions were actually doing that, which was, I don't know, quite telling, really, because of course, the fanatical people down the chain are going to implement what the fanatical people up the chain are trying to do to, one, save their ass, and two, forward planetary dissemination, right? So it was interesting. It was interesting to be one of the guinea pigs in some idea that sounded like it was frivolous, or like, oh my God, let's get them to sell door to door. Do you think they'll do it? And parents making kids sell books door to door, so, and not like the parents didn't do it too. It was weird. I remember, when we would do that, we'd go to the mission for course in the evening, and, some days they would be like, okay, we're going to sell, go sell Dianetics books and disseminate Scientology. And they'd be like, you either had to buy the book and then sell it, because the idea of exchange in Scientology is so crazy. And you had to make them buy the book, and you couldn't give a book because it's out exchange, and then they won't value and blah, blah. All these things to make them buy a book, which was what they were hiding when they're trying to say, well, if you really want them to be more able or better, then they'll reach for it by buying it, and then they'll value it more. Which again is like most Scientology. It's like rooted in just a nugget of truth, and then the rest is like their projection of trying to get their stats or disseminate their product for money. And so that's kind of how I grew up, with those ideas in mind. Artists selling goods and wares, it all kind of fit together, right? Well, my dad, after a while, we moved to my great-grandparents' place, and my uncle and aunt stayed in Santa Cruz. So then we started doing courses at the Concord mission and being involved with the Concord mission. And I guess partially it was great because we were detached a little bit more, but we were still online. So my dad started to leave more and leave me with my great-grandparents. Which for me, at that point, I was already pretty accustomed to the idea that I was an adult being, or a big being in a child's body. So I was already, I'd already gotten tons of Dianetic auditing, and, went back to many lifetimes of traumatic experiences. So the idea of having a time track and being that old of a spiritual being wasn't like odd or foreign. It was normal. And something has been hard for me through my life to disassociate from Scientology, to be honest. And that brings up lots of weird stuff of, how much truth is there in what they say, and what is the BS? And when there's that much dark energy attached, can you really separate those two things? Or do you have to throw it all out and kind of restart with your basic ideas or principles? I wanted to say stable datums, which is absolutely Scientology. But your basic beliefs. So after we moved, my dad was gone a lot, and I was left alone, and so I started, I was doing a course called the Advanced TRs course. And I was doing all the upper indoctrination, or indoc TRs. And they're sold as auditor training, like teaching you to be a good auditor. So when you question it, they're like, oh yeah, well, when you had your session with the auditor, they were trained in this, so that if something huge comes up in your session, blah, 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 they'll be trained to handle it, and there's all these drills. It's mostly about intention and projecting your thoughts, and there's a few on physical body control and stuff like that, but it's mainly meant to reinforce the basic TRs, OT, TR0 through TR4, and then it goes up from there to more situational training routines, like giving clear commands, giving intentional commands. At the time, it feels very empowering as a child to be able to assert and project. But really, when you look at it later in life, it's something that is really hard to dissect and to remove the parts that were more corrosively persuading than the parts that were actually help to solidify a moral fabric. So, that becomes a struggle with a lot of us that grew up in these high controlled environments that were normalized. They're normalized from the beginning. That's the crazy thing. It's like, it wasn't odd to have stat graphs. It wasn't odd to be chitted. It wasn't odd to be flunked for things. And even though you mask your developmental process, it's very impingeful when you're not developmentally ready to experience that kind of control, and differentiate between, pure emotions and corrosive control. So that was kind of my life. And as I was doing these courses, my dad was gone more, so I started going to course, quote unquote, but then hanging out with my friends and going skateboarding. Now, mind you, that was bad enough. I wasn't doing any drugs. I wasn't doing any weird stuff like that, like a lot of my friends were kind of starting to get into. But just skipping course wasn't over. It was a withhold. It was something that would come up in session or come up in training as a present time problem, those kind of things. So I did that. I got caught. I got in trouble. We had a big ethics handling, and then it just so happened that a recruiting mission was in town. And I had been recruited prior. When I did my student hat at the San Francisco org a couple years prior to that, I had been, a recruiting mission had come by, but I was like 11, almost 12, and it was just too young. So they kind of put me on what's called a Project Prepare. And it was like a couple year thing where, okay, when we're in town, we'll come check on you or blah, 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 or whatever. So since I was in ethics kind of trouble and I was not taking my auditor training seriously, I got pulled in by the executive director of the org, my father, and a recruiter mission. It was two women, an older woman named Jan Carter and a younger woman named Ricky. I can't remember her original maiden name, but she later married an Italian guy named Andreas Galbriati. So her name ended up being Galbriati, but it wasn't when she recruited me. Either way, they were recruiting for the Flag Service Org, and in Florida, in Clearwater. And so the way Scientology works is whatever mission gets sent out, and if they get a recruit, that's what org that they're supposed to go to. So they're like slated for that org kind of thing. So I was slated to go. Well, anyways, they were from Florida. So they pulled me in to do an ethics handling or to talk to me and confront me. And at the time when I was younger, I really did want to join the Sea Org and thought that was my purpose and calling in life. And then when I was almost 14, I felt a little different. I felt like I wanted, like the world would maybe have lots of doors, and there's more stuff for me to explore rather than just saying this is it. And looking back now, it's probably developmental, right? I'm learning a lot of my own, to keep my own counsel and to be, a couple deer there. But it was always present. Scientology was always present. I was always taking courses, or I was involved with what was going on. When socially we would go and hang out at the Mission or at the Org or at Los Gatos or Mountain View, or like, there were so many things to do around the Scientology group. So there was always something going on. And right about that time is when the Larry Wollersheim case was it? Yeah, one thing dying for Wollersheim was going on. So we were, for example, when I was in San Francisco, we were doing our part of the student hat is you do the TRs again, and we would be called out of classroom, the whole or the whole class, and we would go to the courthouse in San Francisco, and we would stand there and do a vigil, a silent vigil and they would tell us to do OTTR0 on the building. So you would like project your intention on the building, and the saying at the time was not one thin dime for Wollersheim. And I don't know who came up with that, but that was kind of clever. And it was portrayed to be they were prosecuting us as Scientologists, and they wanted to destroy the religion, right? Now, there was definitely no facts involved, but it was just this broad stroke of like, they're bad, we're good, like us versus them, right? Like any cult or antisocial kind of mentality can be, is like it's black and white, right? So we did all that, and fast forward back to the office and the ED and the Mission, and I resisted, or what they would call ridged. I ridged against that, which to them kind of meant more counter intention than actually having my own ideas and thoughts, or even them being valid, because the only valid thing is to serve in the Sea Org. And if you want to, you really want to do it, and you really want to forward and make this world a better place, that's the only place you can be, right? So, the mission, the head mission lady, Jan, she came up with an idea after hours of me like, I don't want to sign it. I don't think this is, can we wait? And we did this thing called a repair of past ethics conditions. So it's like it's like an ethics auditing cycle, kind of like they find a past condition of ethics where you were in a condition, but it either wasn't acknowledged, or it was it was the wrong condition, and that's why I have upset. So it's kind of like that bait and switch with Scientology. It's, here's the problem, like, oh, now you're good. So all your considerations are handled. So now you're going to do the thing that everybody knows is the best thing to do, right? And it's like, it's sort of that first experience into when you are around somebody who's dedicated to misunderstanding you, nothing gets in except for their narrative. Everything is filtered through their narrative. And unless you fall lockstep with that narrative, you're just going to be handled. You're just a problem to be handled. A present time problem. You ridge. It's like all these things that are just meant to be like, well, as soon as you get rid of this aberrated behavior or this stupid idea, you'll see that what the right thing to do is. All right, I'm gonna take a quick stop here, get some gas, and I will be back.